Hello, beautiful people. I thought I would do a little ramble about, or on the theme of my last essay, which is called Who's the Real Victim Here? And the tagline of that is, psychopaths can't help it, we can. And this is, I believe, quite a deep subject because it relates actually to manifestation as well, as the sort of more surface level. So on the surface level, the gist of the piece, the thesis really is like, okay, given what we know about psychopathy, which is that somewhere between 1 and 5% of all human beings, basically in a nutshell, don't really have a conscience and can't really access that. They can pretend to, they can act as if they do, but they don't actually care about others. So they're basically dysfunctional. They're lacking in what makes a human fully human. So given that, then you have this question of responsibility. So breaking up the word responsible, response, able. Who is able to respond to the problems that this brings up? If you have 100 people and one of them doesn't care, but can pretend very convincingly to care, which is the case, let's say, with what so-called successful psychopaths. That is people who don't become serial killers, but are instead consider themselves supreme, so supremacists, elitists. These people are, master manipulators, really, because they can look at the psychology of the rest of the other 99 and use their understanding of psychology to manipulate and to condition. So that's a problem, really, because it leads to a world like this where immorality is the norm and delusion is the norm, and where people are not free within their own minds and are out of alignment in their thoughts, feelings and actions. But the question of responsibility is what I've come to really flip on its head, having been someone who, having gone through the phase of anger, finger pointing, of the evil baddies that control, in air quotes, the world, I've come to realise, well, what does that really mean? Manipulate. I mean, it's the question. Well, who is really responsible for the lie? Who's really responsible for the lie? The person who can't help lying, or the person who falls for the lie? And who is really responsible for this immoral world? Is it those who are inherently immoral, who actually can't help themselves, literally don't have the capacity to care, holistically? Or is it the 99% who do care but act out of alignment and fall for the conditioning? And the answer's just so obvious to me when I sort of reframe it in that way. And it's the reason this is related to manifestation, or the other way of sort of thinking about manifestation, which is more about choosing reality, is that this is a choice. So when we look at, let's say, the injustice of the world, we can kind of ask the question, well, if I want this to be a different way, and I'm railing against the machine, raging against the machine, it's really can be so much easier. I see this flip that's represented in this essay and in this idea. It's a complete empowerment switch, basically. It's saying, well, the baddie's gonna bad, or whatever, dictator's gonna dictate, but like, as I've said, in other places, a dictator in heaven, a dictator is a madman and is treated as such. It's only in hell that the good people, again in air quotes, do nothing and allow themselves to be dictated to. So if we choose to shift towards, which we are doing, we are doing this, people are doing this, and I am doing this, I'm shifting away. This is obvious. A way that this is so obvious in the world today is how I just hear sort of from every side, really. I seem to be hearing this idea that it's the idea of the uniparty. People are seeing through the narrative of democracy, or let's say they're not quite seeing through it, because that's a bigger step. What they tend to see through is the two-party system, and they see that there's a people call it the they call it the Epstein class, or they refer to them as the elite. Some people still call these people the elite. I obviously call them elitists. But they're seeing through it, but they're not really seeing through in my view, generally they're not seeing through the deeply embedded programming about justice. The way I'd say that democracy works is it appeals to truths to sell a lie, and that's the way a lot of programming works. So it's true that we are ultimately of equal, we are equally free, so we are equally sort of valid, let's say. We each are valid, we each are of God, and in a sense that's a so there is an equality exists. There is an immutable sort of equality to life. You're born, and that justifies that justifies your existence, as it were. But that is sort of through in democracy that's manipulated into an idea of something different, which is that the rule is, rule by the mob, by the majority. So, and it's also, the majority can so easily be manipulated, and evidently have been. And people are seeing this in terms of the left-right divide. People are seeing this very clearly. But they're not really seeing, I think, to the heart of what the lie of democracy is, because there's something much deeper there, which is about the state and the idea of external authority. Because really, when you're saying that there's equality, the real depth of what that really means is that you are free. You are actually free, and that, if you really follow that through, then you cannot justify theft. You can't justify taxation. It's an obvious example. Taxation is theft. And so, there's obviously a discussion there around time and where we are now and how we get to anarchy, because I don't propose that we can just I don't know what's possible. I don't know, but I can begin to choose freedom, and I can begin to choose, or I don't even begin, I can choose freedom. I do choose freedom, and I do choose to value your freedom. And this is really the beginning of shifting this dynamic of what I call subdominism, which is there's in a way the master-slave dynamic, but it's deeper than that, because the slave is also the master of the sub-slave or the animal or the material world. That's how this works, and I'm writing about another piece about that now, so that's a bit of another subject. But just to sort of get back to the theme of this, the 1% and the 99%, the 99% hold all the power, and we are manifesting this reality. We are responsible for the perceived injustice of the world, for everything. We are more responsible than 1%, because there's more of us, a lot more of us. That is the actual, because of our freedom, there's no, the 1% are not more powerful than 99%. They are 1%, 1 out of 100% responsible. We, with our conscience, with our latent, unused, forgotten consciences, we are 99% responsible. That's all of it, that's all of it. That's the whole responsibility. And that's the switch. I think this is such a freeing sort of flip to do, and to sort of flip out of the victim mentality that's kind of prevalent in a lot of, let's say, sort of activist spaces, mindsets, and the conspiracy mindset as well. It's kind of like, if only they would stop being so powerful, then we could be free. And let's just flip that on its head and say, and acknowledge, we are free, we are choosing this reality, we do choose reality, we do create reality. There are almost infinitely more of us than them, and they're lost. You know, these people that are supremacists, they're lost. They don't understand truth. They don't understand the ultimate truth. They don't understand their divinity. They don't understand their place in divinity. They're egomaniacs, and it is actually our responsibility to help them, not to wait for them to, you know, figure it out, because they're not going to figure it out, because they're psychopaths. They don't have what we have. And until we use what we have and bring our feelings into alignment with our thoughts and our actions, we would remain stuck in this situation. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is that we're shifting into a new reality, or the same reality but with a different emphasis, a different choice to acknowledge our freedom, our responsibility, to listen to the still small voice within, the conscience, to align and to take responsibility seriously. Thank you. See you later.